Hello YouTube, Stefan Cote here. For those of you who have been following some of my posts on online forums, especially on A2A's forums and stuff like that, you probably know that I'm a sucker for the Milviz DHC-3 Otter. I hope I got that pronounced right. I am no pilot, but my dad used to be a bush pilot, and amongst the 5,000 hours of flight time he has, his logbook says that about 3,000 of these were actually flown in the piston single Otter, and I think I would risk myself saying that most of these 3,000 hours were on float. Although if I look at his albums, he probably flown quite a few hours on skis, on wheel skis, and on wheels. So I want to take some of your time today to introduce you to the latest release from Milviz, a company based here in Quebec, Montreal, or should I say Montreal, Quebec. After the pretty well made DHC2 Beaver, they came out with the DHC3 Otter. And I was a little bit anxious about that release. Suffice to say that it was well worth waiting for it. The quality is really good. There's a few flaws, there's a few, I think, little things here and there, but all in all, this is a very solid add-on. So you're currently looking at P3D version 4.1, a bunch of ORBX and a bunch of Active Sky stuff goodies to make the scenery looks better. We're pretty anchored in front of the dock at Squamish in British Columbia. So I'll do a quick flight around and I'll tell you my impression as we go along. So let's get going. So the panel is a little bit more modern than what I was used to see when I was younger, flying with my dad or flying with the company where my dad used to fly. Their Otter were not that outfit, but you can see that it's still a classic steam gauge panel, so most of the gauges are analogic here, with the exception of my beloved GTN 750 from Flight 1 that you can see right here on the passenger side. Alright, so the startup procedure is pretty hi-fi. I would say that the only thing that it's really missing is the ability to start the engine with only prime fuel. Normally those radials are start using only primer. They don't put the mixture in until the engine actually caught up and fires. In this rendition of Milviz, we do have to use some of the mixtures to get it to start, but still you're gonna see that it's doing a pretty good job, a pretty decent job. Alright, so we're gonna put some power on. So one of the things we need to make sure is that we have fuel in a selected fuel tank. So center tank right now is pretty much fuel. Just so you know, my fuel and payload right now, I'm close to maximum gross weight. I'm probably around 7,700 pounds out of a maximum takeoff, maximum gross weight of 8,000 pounds. So what we need to do now is we need to build some fuel pressure in the lines. So about 5 psi will do the trick. There we go. Once you're there, you have to prime. My dad says 2, never more than 3 shots of primer. So we'll go with 3. Then we're gonna crack the throttle open. There we go. And we're gonna start cranking. Boost coil comes on at the same time with a few revs. Magnetos to both. And as I said, mixture on. And there she is. She's alive. I'm gonna lean out a little bit just to make sure that I'm not falling those spark plugs, and we're gonna make sure that oil is good, oil pressure is good. And let's close that door. I'll use a keyboard shortcut for that one. There we go. Alright. Okay. One thing I notice is even though you put your water rudders down, you do need to have a serious amount of speed to be able to really taxi that thing. And the water rudder do have a pretty good efficiency once you're up to a certain speed, but they also break the plane. So you have to feed in some power if you want to make a 180-degree turns, just like I'm doing right now. But once you're going straight, you're releasing the pressure on the water rudder. She has a tendency to glide pretty well on without too much power, so that's pretty good because we all know that water physics by default in FSX and even in P3D has never been amazing. Excuse me. We're still waiting for A2A to come up with AccuFeel, which, if I remember correctly from my days in FSX, fixed that kind of problem to a certain extent. Alright, so about the Otter. The Otter is a very STOL plane. It has a very, very huge set of flaps. Actually, it's a dual slot flap system on the trailing edge, and the first slot on the flap system is actually covering the whole wing. So basically the ailerons are attached to that first slot of flaps. Let me show you this. So you're going to see as I bring flaps down, you're going to see that the ailerons are going to come down. Pretty much just like the Beaver. The reason why I'm mentioning that is because compared to traditional GA, like for example Cessna's, this plane is operated with a lot of flaps throughout all of its flight, all of the steps of the flight. So during takeoff, during climb, and even during cruise. And this is where I have a bit of a grip here, although it's not that bad. I don't know if you can see the flap gauge here. Excuse me. Right now my flaps are set to climb. On the real Otter, there's an higher position than cruise. When you bring the flap up, you don't bring them up completely up. There's still another notch after that above cruise. Doesn't want to go there. Sorry, I don't have my track higher connected. But what I'm saying here is once flaps are set on cruise, they're not completely up, and you keep them there during the cruise. Now, there's a little bit left above, or more retracted than cruise here, but my souvenir, in my memory, I thought it was a bit more than that. Now, about the land and down, this is where it's definitely missing something. Okay, I'm gonna bring all the flaps down. You can look at the indicator, and you can see that, okay, this is full down, and according to the indicator, the next step up is takeoff. So land and down are the same position here. Again, in real life, I think there's an extra 5 degrees of flaps below land to bring you to the full down position. So I'm not sure. Like I know Milviz developed that Otter with a real Otter pilot. So maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's my memory that's strict. But I'm gonna have to check that with them on the forums. I do have a lot of faith in the fact that if they say that they have a real Otter pilot on team, that they're not lying about it. But maybe there's different type of flap indicator system or something like that, depending on which Otter you're flying. But all those that I've been sitting in when I was younger, I clearly remember that the land position was not full down. Like there was another notch, even though these are not notch, these are hydraulic flaps that you pump down. But yeah, there was another stroke of the hydraulic pump below land to go to fully extend. And anyway, I noticed that right away when I first tried the Otter yesterday. All right, so as you can see now, we're taxiing on the river towards the outside of that. I think it's a wood logging complex. These, to me, they look like a system for piling wood. So we're gonna go in the big bay right outside of Squamish in the valley, and we're gonna take off from there. Although between you and I, the room that I have, the space that I have available in front of me right now, is already more than I need to take off. You're gonna see the Otter in real life, even with only its original 600, even with the original and I say only 600 horsepower Pratt & Whitney engine, was always regarded as a very STOL plane, as long as it wasn't overloaded. I think the problem is that the cabin in the Otter is just so huge that it's super easy to overload the Otter. If you fill the fuel tanks, you can put just so much stuff in that cabin that it's easy to have a 500, 600, 700 pounds of overload. Like, it's completely different than the Beaver. The Beaver, I would say, it's the opposite. Like, the Beaver, you have a solid 1,000 pound of payload, and the cabin is just so small that you probably won't end up being overloaded by much. In the Otter, it's the total opposite. You're allowed for 2,000 pounds, roughly, depending on your fuel load, of payload, but it's just so gigantic in the rear there that putting more than 2,000 pounds is really easy. So I guess this is probably where turbine Otters are shining, although I'm pretty sure that they shouldn't be overloaded. I know that for a fact that a PT6, for example, can be held at a higher power setting for much longer than those Pratt & Whitney radial engine. So the Otter is a 600 horsepower engine on takeoff at 36 inches of manifold of pressure. But if I remember correctly, you're only allowed takeoff power for 30 or 45 seconds. You're supposed to be able to cut back to climb power pretty quickly. Alright, so cylinder temperature is reaching 100 degrees. That's a bit low, but I don't think it's going to go any higher in the sim. Oil temperature is good, we're in the green. Fuel pressure is stable, and it's in the green. So if I look at all the parameters, we're good. And I'm pretty sure the wind is calm. I didn't check. Oh no, we have 5 knots on 121. So right now I have a tailwind. So we're gonna turn around. We're gonna do what we call a step taxi. I'm gonna climb around step. And now we're gonna taxi down the bay a little bit, and we're gonna take off towards the town of Squamish. So I'm gonna keep my flaps on takeoff, and I'm gonna go for 35, 40 knots. There we go. I'm just gonna pull back on power now. My yoke is full back because I find that it doesn't nose up much as it should, like when we're climbing on step, like in the real life. But again, it's still pretty good. Alright, so we're gonna turn around, we're gonna pull up the water rudders, and we're gonna be ready for takeoff. So I'm just gonna let her settle down in the water. There we go, and let's turn it around. Gotta make sure that we need some lights on. Alright, so just like in the real life with an Otter, as soon as you're out of the water, you don't nose up. You actually keep the nose down, and you use that to build speed. You don't want altitude on float, you want speed, and then you can think about retracting flaps to climb position, and after that you can start to think about reducing power, pulling it back to climb power. So here we go. You have to be very careful not to overboost. They implemented that. That means that maximum throttle will give you more than climb power. Nose down. Sorry about the camera here. Alright, we're gonna pull flaps to climb position. There we go. And we're gonna power back to climb power, which is 30 inches and 20 RPM, 2000 RPM. And as you can see, even with the nose really low on the horizon, that thing climbs. And again, this is really characteristics of the Otter in real life, and that's a huge difference with the Beaver. And I know someone moving from Cessnas, from 185s, from 180s to the Beaver, they find that, oh my god, the Beaver climbs with a pretty good nose down attitude, but this is nothing compared to the Otter. So about 80 miles an hour on the climb. I'm gonna put flaps to cruise. Gonna nose up a little bit, and we're gonna maintain about 70 knots. That should be about our 80 miles an hour. This is another thing that's new for me. The Otter I've been around at the old days miles an hour speedometer. This one has a knot speedometer, so I'm always trying to do a bit of a translation here, but I'm still struggling sometimes. So I end up, most of the time I end up being a little bit too hot, too fast. So as I said, we're close to maximum gross weight. We're climb power right now, and we're climbing about 500 feet per minute, and that's exactly by the book. This is exactly by the book. These numbers are dead on. So on this, seriously, Milviz, good job. You guys are right on. Okay, I'm gonna be careful not to climb too much. I'm just gonna clear the terrain. So I'm gonna go to about 1,500 feet, and maybe we can go for a quick tour around Squamish, and then we're gonna do an approach. We're gonna land where we just took off from, and that's gonna show you guys how the attitude of the Otter approaching on final over a river, over a lake, is something quite impressive considering the huge amount of flaps and all the authority of those flaps. Another thing that I think Milviz really nailed here is the pedal work. When you are flying a straight Otter on float, a single Otter on float, sorry, you have to be on the ball. You really have to synchronize those turns, especially when you start to feed in some flaps. I'm gonna go cruise setting here, which is 28-18, and I'm gonna lean out just a bit. There we go. You really have to be on the ball, because those pontoon under the planes are pretty low. They're kind of heavy, although they're supposed to be they're supposed to have their own lift in the air, but they still add a substantial amount of mass under the airplane that's slung way below the wings, way below the center of rotation, even on the roll axis. Now what that means is that it means basically that every time you're going to use those ailerons, you're gonna have to coordinate the turns pretty much as bad or as intense as a Piper Cup. For those of you who've been flying A2A's Cup, for example, you're gonna feel at home here. So the Otter on float is definitely a plane that you dance on the pedals. Here, my rudder is central, is neutral. Look at how much I'm slipping in that turn. So you really gotta feed in some pedal. Yep, sorry, I'm descending here. Well, 200 feet below 1500, that's bad, sorry. I normally fly with the Oculus Rift and with Fly Inside, but the problem is that I couldn't find a good way of recording this for a video on YouTube. Like, you guys end up, instead of seeing what I see in my heads-up display, you guys end up looking at a very narrow, vertical, portrait kind of aspect screen. You can probably see that in some of my other videos. But the reason why I'm saying that is because since I have the Oculus Rift, I kind of ditched out my track IR, so I'm not very used to pan the camera around like that anymore, and I find it very unsatisfying. But that's what I have right now, so please apologize, indulge me. Alright, so we're coming down that river, down the valley that goes along Squamish. So I'm gonna call base by the time we get in front of that oil tanker over there. So I'm gonna start a shallow descent right now to about 1000. And by the way, if you wonder why I did not click OK, continue, blah 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 on the GTN 750, it's because I don't want that GPS to yell, pull up, terrain ahead, and so on. It doesn't really like when we fly in valleys like we're doing right now, and it rarely realizes that we're flying on float, so it always ends up screaming at me before landing because it thinks I'm about to crash. So yeah, for the purpose of that video, I just didn't activate it in a sense. Alright, so you guys can see we're gonna land about here, and we should be off step even before that dock over there. So I'm gonna put in carbide, I'm gonna pull back power. Full rich, full fine. I'm gonna maintain about 1500 RPM, and we're gonna let the speed come down. As soon as we're in the white arc, we're gonna start to extend some of the flaps, and then you're gonna see some of the magic happening with the Otter. Alright, so we're gonna go halfway between cruise and climb. We're gonna maintain, there we go, 70 knots. We're gonna go climb, and 60 knots. We're gonna go full flaps. And now you're not reading wrong. We're at 50 knots indicated. Again, a lot of rudder pedal work in here. I'm almost half rudder. There we go. I'm definitely half rudder just for that turn. So you can see that with the flaps extended, the nose down, slow indicator speed. This is really a keep the ball in using your rudders. So we're gonna aim for those two markers there. One thing that I really miss when I'm not flying in VR is the height perception. Like I'm struggling to see how high I am above the water. 200 feet. So we're probably about 100 feet above water right now. There we go. I'd say about 50. And I'm gonna start to flare it, and just gonna hold it there. There she goes. I'm gonna put my water rudder down. In real life, I don't think I would need water rudder already. I think I would still have enough authority just with my prop wash and my normal rudder at 20 and 30 knots like that. But in the sims, we need to pull them down. We need to use the water rudder a bit more. All right, we're gonna bring the flaps slightly up to takeoff position. Now, if you wonder why I'm keeping some flaps down, it's because even though in the sim, the plane is gonna brake, it's gonna slow down really fast if I cut the throttle. In real life, you want as much drag as possible if you need to stop in a hurry. I mean, in a place like that bay area here, in the entrance of the river like that, there could be a boat, there could be a kayak or something like that. So I got in the habit of the old pilots that says keep some flaps down on water. That way you're going to be able to stop a little bit shorter. Alright, we'll get her off step. Okay. Now, I didn't come here for no reason. I don't know if you guys can see in what kind of a hole I am, but we're going to take off from here with our gross weight, with our max gross weight. I'm not saying that I would do that in real life, but since this is a sim, I want to show you what this plane is capable of, and how basically Milviz really nailed the STOL aspect. I wouldn't do that in real life. I'm gonna keep my water rudder down right now because I want to make sure that if I need to make a left turn up there to follow the curve of the river, if I'm still in the water, that I will be able to. So I'm gonna make sure that I'm carbide off. Yep. Full rich, full fine. We're gonna go 36 inches, and I'm gonna show you what that thing can do. Alright, here we go. Remember, you're not fighting for the nose up, you're fighting for speed here. Keep the nose down. Use those pedals. And we're out of dodge. And as I said, I wouldn't have done that in real life, but you can clearly see here in the sim, the Otter is very, very STOL. So that's pretty much about the flight characteristic of Milviz latest release, their DHC-3 Otter. So I hope I'll see you guys next time. If you have questions, please by all means post them in the comment below. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't like the video, give it a thumb down, but please tell me why you didn't like it at the same time, so this way I can try to make it a little bit better for next time. So I'll see you around. Thanks everyone for watching. Appreciate it. See you. Bye bye.